Hello and welcome to From Maiden to Mother, the podcast. This is Kelsey. I'm your host. And today we are chatting with Diana about her journey from maidenhood through motherhood. We get into some topics such as anovulation, irregular cycle. We talk about what it's like to conceive using a donor and assisted reproductive technologies. And I hope that you enjoy this chat as much as I did. Hello, we are here with Diana. How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me. It is such a pleasure to have the chance to chat with you.
I'm honestly super excited. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Why don't you start by just telling us about where you are at on your journey to motherhood?
So right now I'm currently in my cycle tracking because my periods are so very irregular. I stopped taking birth control in September of 2021. And I thought for a while there we were doing good, but it seems that, I'm still having some issues regulating my cycle. So right now that's where we're at, but we are looking to actually meet our donor in January. So
Yay.
I'm
That's
super
coming up so
excited.
soon.
I know. It's
I
crazy.
mean,
That's like a month and a half away.
relative to your journey, it's coming up soon.
Yeah, it is.
So tell me a little bit about what it's been like to get to know your cycle. Is it something that you've always had a chance to know well?
Not really. I recently just started tracking my cycle like maybe 2 years ago. Once I finally started to realize like it's not necessarily normal to not have a period for 90 plus days. So really once I got older and started to realize like these things aren't normal and you're supposed to have a period every, 28 to 30 days, I was like, wow, this isn't normal. Maybe I should, start keeping track of these things. And so I did for the most part just for my own like well-being. And then when I met my husband and we started talking about having a family, I was like, okay, well, I'm already, doing this anyway. Let's, do it a little bit more consistently. So
How did you know that it wasn't quote unquote normal to have a 90-day cycle?
I feel like maybe there's this stigma that, women say that you're supposed to have a period every month and it's normal to have one every month. And if you don't have one every month or every, 5 weeks or whatever, that's not normal.
So that's something that we talk about a lot kind of
Yeah,
in female groups. We compare ourselves to
yeah,
each other.
exactly. So it was more so like word of mouth from others, like, oh, maybe that's not normal. And I'm like, oh, maybe you're right.
I don't even remember what they taught us in health class about what was normal to have a period. I'm sure they generalized it to once a month.
Like they do with everything else, which is so general.
I feel like my formal education on the reproductive system was so brief and so quick. I can hardly remember what I learned from my friends and what I learned from my teachers.
It all meshes together.
Exactly. And it's so interesting how we learn these things almost out of context. Like if you're in grade school and you don't have a period yet and you're learning about the menstrual cycle, it can very easily just go right over your head.
Yeah, you know what? So my husband is a trans man. So the other day we got on this topic and we were talking about it, how I was only 10 when I started my first menstrual cycle and so was he. And he was like, I had no idea what it was because I don't even think I had gone through like that health education, sex ed class, like I don't think that either of us had experienced that before we had started menstruating. And that's so crazy to me that I don't know if it's different in Canada, but here in the United States, like it's so hard to get that education for children when they need it, before they need it.
It really varies from region to region. I was very lucky that I went to a pretty liberal, modern school, like it was, as opposed to, a more conservative school.
Yeah.
And so I did get a pretty comprehensive sex education, but I know that that's not the experience for everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I almost feel lucky, which is so sad. Like it should be a right. I have a stepdaughter and I think about the things that I really hope that she knows when it's time for her to know all of these things on her
Hmm.
path, because there are so many things that you're right, the timing just doesn't always line up.
The timing is everything.
Exactly. And so many things are kind of brushed off until you're in the wanting to have kids zone too. Even from doctors, they're like, "Oh,
Exactly.
don't worry about that. You're not trying to have kids yet." And it's like, "Well, I should have worried about that a few years ago. I think it would have made the
Yeah,
trying to have
right?
kids easier."
Like the birth control, they don't tell you the side effects and stuff, the long-term side effects of that stuff until, you're in a position like we are where we're trying to conceive and trying to have children. And now we have all these lingering side effects that make it harder or even impossible to conceive and carry a child.
What kind of side effects did you notice lingered after you went off birth control?
So I had the next one on implant, and I noticed it took almost, I want to say 6 to 8 months to get an actual period again.
Wow.
And then, yeah, and for me, that was like, wow, like, does this really, these amount of hormones stay in your body that much that, 6 to 8 months later down the line, you're still struggling to even get a period? Um, I also noticed that my periods are not the same as they were. So typically my period was only, I want to say maybe 2 to 3 days long, and now it's anywhere between like 3 to 5, 3 to 6. But that could also be maybe because I'm getting older, and people say that your bodies change as you get older. You become like a woman, I guess you could say, and your body kind of changes and adjusts. So maybe that's what it is. But I have noticed that it is, a lot more common for my periods to not come regularly.
How old are you?
I'm going to be 25 in April.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to be 29 this month, and I did notice a shift in my body kind of 24, 25, 26.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. Typically, your body changes like when you first start menstruating and then around like 18 and then again around 25. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is just how my body is going to be for the rest of my life. And I'm only going to get a period every 3 months.
And that's another thing. We're often taught that, you get your period and it is what it is. We're not taught that it can change and it can ebb and flow. And when you get into even just looking at how you feel in your own cycle, one cycle at a
Mhm.
time, and then you can look at how you feel over the course of many cycles,
Yeah,
it really is a very distinguishable pattern if you know to look for it, if someone points it out
exactly.
and suggests that you look for it.
Exactly. That's very
When
true.
when your period came back after being off of birth control, what was that like for you?
um, Honestly, it was really hard. I've always had really rough periods. So, endometriosis and ovarian cancers and uterine cancers and stuff like that run in my mom's side of the family. So, um, I've always had terrible periods. I've always been told, like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're fine. Just take this birth control pill and you'll be fine. And so for me, it was, do I make the sacrifice to get off of this medication and, suffer my periods every month? So I was like, okay, you know what? Let's make the decision. I made the decision. I got off of it. When I got my period the very first time, I was miserable for days. It was terrible. My husband was like, are you sure you're okay? And I was like, I'm fine. Like, I'll tough it out. I'll get through it, whatever. Now that they're so far apart, that uterine lining is building up. So my periods are very heavy, but the pain isn't necessarily as bad as it used to be. Still not my favorite thing in the world, but, you know, who is like I love having cramps and I love being on my period. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly, exactly. I mean, when you go 7 months without, when you're hoping for it to resume, there is a sense of relief. I remember I cried when my period came back. It was gone for over a year after I'd stopped birth control. I had been on the Depo-Provera shot, and I found it very interesting that my doctor presented that to me as normal. Well, at kind of around the 6 month mark,
mhm.
she thought, well, I mean, we could keep waiting. But there wasn't a concern even at the 1 year mark. It was like, okay, well, we'll try something. We'll try metformin. Actually, they put me back on birth control for a month. And I said, I'm only doing this once. This is counterproductive to my plan. I'll
Yeah,
try it
right?
once. I'll do one cycle to see if that triggers a withdrawal. But it's just crazy how we're told all of these things, but not told to just observe our body and learn all of these things for ourselves.
Yeah. Like cycle tracking should be taught in schools and it's not. And that's just so crazy to me because it's a necessary skill for most women nowadays, whether you're trying to conceive or not.
Yeah, it's become a very necessary thing, especially if you're not trying to conceive,
Mm-hmm.
to know your cycle and to have
Exactly.
that knowledge. It really is very important. How has this affected your relationship?
Um, it's hard. It it's hard. My husband and I talk about it all the time. Like, if we could conceive naturally and, my periods were regular, like maybe we would already be parents, or at least be pregnant at this point. And it's not necessarily the easiest discussion to have. And, we talk about it quite often that we may not get pregnant the first time around because my body seems to be just doing whatever it wants to do at the moment. And we can schedule a time to meet with our donor and, do our insemination. But what if I'm not ovulating the way that my body is supposed to be, but yet my doctor is still brushing it off like it's not necessarily important to her, but it's important to me. And it's a hard conversation to have. We stick through it. We have those hard conversations, and it's nice to have those hard conversations, especially with somebody who, you are married to and that you need to have those hard conversations with.
Yes, and I so appreciate you sharing because when we talk about tracking our cycle and are we ovulating, that's a lot of pressure on the receiving partner.
Mm-hmm.
And we take on a lot of that, but there is a lot of pressure on the support partner too.
Mm-hmm.
They're still going through all of this mentally and
Mm-hmm.
emotionally as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes physically, absolutely, that can be a huge part of it on both sides. But the mental and the emotional can weigh so heavy when you don't really know how to express that. Like, how do you
Yeah.
express to your partner, like, oh, it's not my cycle, but I'm still worried. Is it regular and is it going to work?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. We discussed also going through and doing the reciprocal IVF. And for those like who don't know what that is, it's basically where like we would harvest his egg. He would obviously have to come off of his testosterone shots and go through the whole medical process there, and then I would carry his egg. And we have that conversation quite a bit, and we still go back and forth on that. Like are we going to pursue this because it is physically and mentally hard on him to make that decision to stop taking his testosterone shots. And, they put you on birth control for 6 months, and it's very dysphoric for him mentally and physically to do something like that. So that was a decision that we had to make. So now it's like the pressure is on for me to be able to conceive.
Yeah, that is a huge decision to make. And I mean, there are so many different ways to grow a family these
Mm-hmm.
days. And there's lots of different factors, what do you have access to and what is even an
Mm-hmm.
option, physically. And when you do your testing, what is going to give you the best chance?
Exactly.
There's so many different things that you never even imagined that you would have had to even consider.
Yeah, if you had sat down with me at 18 and we were having this conversation, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Because I I never would have imagined that this would be my situation. I always thought, I'll be able to have a baby whenever I feel that I'm ready, and that's not necessarily the case.
No, having to line up your body, which you can't really control how it goes. I mean, even if you're very carefully manipulating your hormones with medications, you
Mm-hmm.
still have to trust that your body's going to respond in a predictable way, line things up with your donor, and then
Mm-hmm.
still hope that it works.
Exactly.
There's still that piece that I think a lot of the time our friends and family forget when we're talking about wanting to have a baby and wanting to grow a family. It's not just as simple as getting all of the ducks in a row. There
Mm-hmm.
is still a piece that comes down to fate or magic
Yeah.
or whatever you want to call it, where you have to just trust that it's going to work after all the
Yeah.
hard navigating.
You can do anything and everything, but at the end of the day, it's not technically your decision to make. It's whatever, I guess higher power, spiritual belief, whatever you believe in that makes that decision for you. And it's just so, I don't know, maybe for me, because I'm an anxious person, it makes me feel overwhelmed because,
Yeah.
you spend all this time and money and effort, and at the end of the day, you may still end up with nothing at all. And that's with a lot of stuff in life, not just necessarily, trying to conceive.
Yeah, you've got to meet in the middle between, we've got to try a little bit. We've got to put in enough effort that it's
Mm-hmm.
possible to have it.
Yeah.
And then you do have to let go. And it's hard to let just a part of you let go because
Yeah.
you've got to stay 75% strong, 80% strong, especially when you're scheduling doctor's appointments. And I don't know, are you guys thinking of doing like the IUI, that kind of insemination?
We talked about that. I think we want to do like an at-home artificial insemination first and try our luck with that. And then if that doesn't work, then I believe that we did discuss the IUI, and that would be our next best option. Um, I think we want to do, like maybe 2 or 3 tries of both, and then if all else fails, we'll maybe resort to IVF, or we did discuss adopting, so that is also an option for us as well. And we would love to have our own child, but there are so many children in this world who need homes as well. So
Yeah. Lots of really, really hard choices to make and things to
mm-hmm.
consider. And I so appreciate you opening up about it because it is not easy to bring up all of these really personal things.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yes.
We're not very, we've come to the decision that, it's the way that we're trying to have a family is not taboo, I guess. Like it's not traditional. So we haven't discussed a lot with like the people around us. We do have a really close friend to us who is in an LGBT relationship as well. And they're also talking about starting a family. So really those are the people that we talk to. But other than that, our friends are in, straight relationships and can have children and are pregnant or already have children. And it's not necessarily something that they find that they want to discuss with you. So it's nice to be able to, come on your podcast and have these conversations with you, because who knows how many other people out in the world are listening to this podcast as well and are in the same situation that I'm in or our friends are in, and, need somebody to be like, it's not just you, like there are other people in the world who are going through the exact same things and are struggling the same way that you are. And it's hard, but you'll get there eventually.
Exactly. It's hard, but we're doing it together, and that makes it just a
Exactly.
little bit easier, I find.
Yes.
And I really appreciate your perspective as someone who's married to a trans person. That is not necessarily a part of the trying to conceive community that is often highlighted. And it's really
No,
brave of you to share your journey and your partner's journey too. I know my partner is very private and it's hard to share my journey while still respecting their journey, but it's
I've
very
always,
important for people to feel seen and heard.
yeah, I've always wondered because you don't talk much about your partner. So I was always curious. And then I think you just recently talked about it in one of your videos that, your partner was more private about it. And that was something that I had brought up to my husband. And I was like, how much of our life do you want me to share? Like, how much of, it's not just me, it's you. And he was like, talk about what you want to talk about. Like, this is our life together. And you're right. Trying to conceive in a marriage with a trans man is really not talked about at all. I tell people, like, oh, my husband and I are trying to have a baby. And they're like, what do you mean trying? And I'm like, okay, well, like, it's not that easy. And typically when you hear IVF, you think either, people in your situation who are struggling to conceive or have conceived and have, miscarried, or you think, gay or lesbian couples. And it's like, okay, well, what about us? Like,
Yes.
we're here too. And people forget that a lot. So I felt like the best way to, make it heard would be to maybe do something like this, a podcast.
Yes. It is such an honor for me to be able to provide a space for people to tell their stories, because I can talk all day about my story. That's great. And I appreciate that people are interested, but I am so interested in what other people go through too, because that's what got me into this community. And that is how I started sharing. Is a friend of mine introduced me to the TTC Instagram world. I didn't even realize that was a thing. I truly thought I was going through this alone.
Yeah.
And we hear that phrase a lot, like, you're not alone, you're not alone. But I truly didn't have anyone that I was talking to about it. Wasn't telling my friends. And then I saw that this friend was sharing her journey very publicly on Instagram. And I was just amazed at her bravery, because it is something that's very personal. And it's lots of really tender emotions that she was putting out there. But I felt so seen. And like, there was not only one person that understood, but her community obviously understood what she was going through for her to share in the way that she did, as often as she did. And that gave me the bravery to share my story. And now it's been like therapy for me. And not everyone has to share their story to heal from the sharing of people's stories.
Yeah. It's crazy how big the TTC community is. And, there's still people out there who are in the situations that we're in and haven't discovered that yet. I just recently, within the last year or so, discovered just how big the community really is. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And it's so diverse. It's not just women who are having trouble carrying a child. It's multiple people, multiple demographics, people all over the world. It's crazy. And if more people knew just how big the TTC community was, I think it would help people feel a lot less, secluded, and people would feel a lot more heard, because it's not something that people want to talk about.
And I feel very grateful that we have social media in this generation to connect us. It makes me kind of sad to think about past generations that didn't have the means to connect in the ways that we do. And like, I know how I feel when I'm talking to people, at an event or whatever, and it comes up that we might have something in common on the thread of infertility or conception. And it's like, oh, you kind of tune into that a little bit. And I can't imagine what it would have been like for me, because I was introduced to this community at the very beginning of my journey. And so I suffered in silence for years when I went through some pregnancy losses while I was not actively trying to conceive. It was very complicated emotions that I was going through. And so now when I was on this journey of very intentionally wanting to welcome in a baby, and it wasn't happening and it wasn't happening. Every month felt like torture. And so I found this community. I think it was probably about 6 months into my journey. And I can't imagine what it would be like now, 3 years into this journey, if I hadn't found that support when I did. It truly came to
Mhm.
me when I needed it.
Yeah. It's crazy how the universe works in the way that it does. Like things just come at you at the randomest times, but really when you need them the most. And I think for me that was a big thing too, was, well, where do I start? Really, really, like, where do I start when it comes to tracking my cycle now that we are trying to have a baby? And it was a lot of research, and not even just the access to social media, but the access to the internet was huge. That is a huge, huge, resource for a lot of women nowadays who are either just starting to try to conceive, women who, in your case, who were, going through their pregnancy losses and needed that support and didn't know where to get it. You just type in TTC support groups on the internet, and there you go. It's crazy. Like it's crazy how the world has changed. And you're right. What did the previous generations do in these cases?
I don't know. I feel like maybe they talked to their friends or, their moms or their sisters. I hope people did. Um, I highly doubt there were advertisements for miscarriage support groups, but
No.
I really hope people have found ways to connect, and I'm sure people have. I wanted to ask you, did you ever have a moment where you knew that you wanted to go on this journey to conception?
I've gone back and forth. My mom has this old project that I did when I was in grade school, and it was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And of course, I wanted to be a mom.
Oh,
But I had gone back and forth for a really long time, and throughout high school, and for, I want to say, maybe 2, 3 years after I graduated high school, I was like, no, I don't want kids. Like, I just don't see it in the cards for myself. And then once I hit, like, I want to say like 22, I kind of realized, like, I want that love in my life, that unconditional, like, mother, parent, child relationship.
mhm.
And I wanted to share that experience with my spouse, with my husband. And my husband wasn't very big on, having kids either until we had started dating. And his roommate at the time, like, literally the same day we started dating, she went into labor with her daughter.
Oh.
And seeing my husband with this tiny little baby and just how excited he got about it, I was like, I could see us doing this in our life. And he was the same way. He was like, you picked up this crying baby, and as soon as you picked her up, she was fine. She stopped crying. We would sit in his bedroom while they were outside doing whatever they were doing and do homework, this tiny little baby. And my husband would be like, where's the baby? And I'm like, oh, she's right here. And he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm just doing homework. Like, we're just hanging out. Like,
Oh, just a
he's like, you have this
natural.
this natural motherly instinct. And for me, it was just like, it seems so rewarding. And everybody wants to make motherhood seem that it's just like the best thing in the world. And it's not always that, but I feel like the benefit outweighs everything else, and it's something that when I think about, I'm like, I can't wait.
Mhm.
It genuinely brings me some type of excitement into my life.
Yeah, I love that when you just tune in to your intuition and you just know that it feels right. And
Yeah.
not everyone has a moment, not everyone has that kind of revelation. Sometimes it happens very slowly and gradually, but when you've checked in
Mm-hmm.
with your truest desires and you just know that that's what you want, there's a peace that comes with
Mm-hmm.
making the hard decisions because you just
Yeah.
know we're moving towards what I want, what my heart wants.
Yeah. It's not always something that you wanted forever. It's something maybe you've suppressed in the back of your mind. Like, no, I don't really want it. No, I don't really need it. It doesn't matter. It's okay. And then now you're so longing to have that and you wanted it this whole time. And now it's like, okay, well, what do I have to do to get it?
That was for sure my experience. I didn't think I wanted to have children for, probably the first 25 years of my life. Just about. I was really on the fence, but it for me came from a place of fear. I had always seen pregnancy and labor and birth as the most traumatic, horrific, painful thing a person could ever endure, and they were lucky to survive it, was basically the
Yeah.
impression that I had been given. And that was through no fault of anyone specifically, just through society and the media.
Yeah.
And that's just what I had heard about it. And so why would I want to go through it? But then I had a moment where I realized, wait a minute, there are people that do this like 10 times.
Yeah,
It
there's
can't
people
be
who
that
just pop
bad.
out kids left and right. And they do it like it's nothing. And I've always told people, like, your experience is your experience. Your birthing experience, your life experience, whatever it may be, is your own. And you can't let somebody else influence that decision for you. You have to kind of go out and live those experiences for yourself.
And that can be really hard to do when you don't know what you want.
Yeah.
The exploring and the figuring it out and the questioning, it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And that's with everything.
I don't know about you, but I often feel pressure to like make a solid decision. I don't like sitting in the unknown. We're either trying or we're not.
That's me. My husband hates it. And it's even like the littlest things. I'm like, are we going to the store? I don't know. Do you want to? I'm like, can you make up your mind? Like, are we going or are we not? And it was something that, this is something that we've never really had to have that conversation. It's always been like, yeah, we're doing this. It's just, when are we going to do it? When is the best time for us to start trying to have a family?
So with your plans leading you to January, where are you at right now trying to get your cycle regulated?
So I just recently started to see my primary care provider. She used to be an OBGYN, so right now I'm comfortable with her. I was telling her, these are my issues. What can we do? We did some blood work. She said everything looked normal. We did a trans-abdominal, trans-vaginal ultrasound. She said everything looked good. I didn't have any, endometriosis. I didn't have any ovarian cysts. I didn't have anything like that. And so when I told her, I still haven't gotten my period. It's been, 64 days, I think, at that point. She's like, well, here, let me give you progesterone. Like, take it for 12 days and take it at night because it will make you sleepy. And I was like, okay. So I took it for 11 days and then my period finally started. And I had a period for about 4 days. And now I'm currently waiting for my period to come. It was supposed to come 3 or 4 days ago. So I'm waiting. I'm conflicted. Progesterone is an intense hormone for me. It makes me emotional. It makes me very anxious. So I kind of am trying to wait it out. I have some of those signs like your period is coming. Just kind of wait it out. I'm trying to trust my body in that process, but it's hard to trust your body when for so long it's just done what it wants, and now you want it to do something else, and it's like, oh well, we're checking out.
Deciding to take progesterone is a really hard decision for me too, every cycle, because I have really intense side effects from it. Anxiety, depression, physical symptoms, you name it. It's really intense for me as well. And every month you have to choose. You have to work with your doctor and decide whether or not it's worth it. It's not an easy black and white decision. There is no perfect protocol. And you're messing with how you feel every single day.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I commend you for putting yourself through this.
That's a huge thing for me too, is do I continue putting myself through the anxiety and the stress and the depression that I'm feeling taking this medication, or do I stop and just let my body work its course, you know? And that's a hard decision to make, definitely.
It's anxiety inducing to think, well, if I trust my body and it doesn't do what I expect it to, if I don't ovulate, I'm going to have to take the progesterone again anyway. And so do I just take it now
Mm-hmm.
or do I wait? And it's not as simple as just calling up your doctor and saying, what do I do? Not
Yeah,
everyone has easy access like that. Not every doctor is going to give you an easy answer.
yeah,
And it's just every cycle. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And then all of a sudden it's going to be your insemination cycle. And now it's like, okay, is my body going to do the same thing that it's been doing?
yeah. I'm like, I had just recently spoke with our donor, like maybe a couple weeks ago, and he's like, "When are you supposed to ovulate next?" And I told him I'm supposed to ovulate like right around Thanksgiving, of course. And he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be out of town." And I was like, "Well, like, God only knows at this point if I'm even gonna ovulate around then. And if my period is now, 3 to 4 days late, when is it gonna come? Like, are we looking at Thanksgiving, or are we looking at, Christmas maybe? It's unpredictable."
Mm-hmm. And
It's
there's so many people involved trying to
Yeah,
put all these moving parts together. Oh, I can't imagine the stress.
it's stressful. My husband is like, "I don't know how you do it. You're superwoman." On top of the fact that I'm a full-time student and I work a full-time Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 job. So there's a lot going on in our life that sometimes, the pieces just don't fit together, and that's even more stressful.
What's one thing you do to relax or unwind or find some peace?
I love to read.
Mm, that's
I am a huge like murder mystery. I love James Patterson, Stephen King. I love to read. I also, my husband and I have been very into puzzles and stuff.
oh
Well, more so
yes.
me. My husband kind of just like pops in and out whenever he wants to. But I try to do a puzzle every once in a while, something to kind of like take me away from my reality and put me somewhere else to kind of decompress from everything that's going on.
It's important to have some kind of like safe space or a happy place or an escape or whatever visualization you need to put on it, but
Yeah.
just something that's separate from that, overly medical, methodical. It
Hmm.
almost becomes obsessive
Yeah.
and anxiety inducing just in its nature. And I feel like that comes with irregular cycles. When you have a more regular cycle, yeah, my cycle's regular right now because of medication, so I can kind of speak to both sides. When my
Yeah.
cycle is more regular, I find I'm way less stressed, way less anxious. There is still an aspect of, oh, am I going to respond the way I'm expecting to? But then I do respond the way I'm expecting to. And it's like, whew, there's a relief.
Yeah.
Whereas when we have cycles where I'm not medicated, I actually have plans to go unmedicated if this cycle is not successful.
Yeah.
And I'm
I was
dreading
watching your
it.
videos. How do you
Oh,
feel about that? Are you nervous?
I'm very nervous because, I want my body to ovulate at all, period, just
Yeah.
to keep the cycle going. And after so many years of not ovulating and not having a cycle at all, it's hard to truly believe that my body is different now than it's been.
Yeah.
And because you never know, your body can be in the healthiest place and you could still not respond. You could still not
Yeah.
ovulate. You could still go down a different path, and you have to just accept it and be okay with it. I mean, you can be frustrated and mad and upset, but then
Yeah.
you do have to just move on because life goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very true. It's, it's stressful. I tell my husband all the time, like, I get so relieved when I get my period because this is cycle day one. Like, we can start over and hopefully it'll go right this time.
Yes,
And
that's
so that's
good.
honestly just what I'm waiting for at this point, is for cycle day one to come around, and hopefully we get that peak ovulation and we can, hopefully keep track and schedule a time to meet with our donor and eventually, have a family. And that's a lot of stress.
Oh, and I hope and pray that it all works out for you. I really do. It's just so unfair that it doesn't get to be easy for everyone. I really just truly wish everyone could just have the path to parenthood that they want.
Yeah. If in a perfect world, somewhere in maybe an alternate universe, there are children for everybody. And it brings me hope, really, to think about that, maybe somewhere in alternate universe or in another life, maybe that the people who are struggling now with infertility or struggling to conceive are parents and they're happy.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, everyone has their struggles. Everyone has their amazing things to be grateful for. And it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling on your journey. It's okay to be
Mm-hmm.
upset and sad and resentful some days and happy and excited and hopeful other days. And it's okay to feel all those things in one day too, because there is no rule book to navigating this.
Yeah, you make the rules as you go. You
Yep.
feel what you feel and you feel it when you want to.
And that's why I'm so grateful to have friends like you to bounce these things off of and to check in with and to make sure that we're doing okay and that we're getting through it together.
Yes, definitely. It's a hard path to go down alone.
Mm-hmm.
Even with a supportive partner and somebody who is so active in the journey with you. Sometimes it's not the same support as you would get from somebody who's going through the struggle that you're going through at the same time.
Exactly. Sometimes you just need someone that really can see your perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's been such a pleasure to chat with you. Before we go, is there anything that you would like to put out there into the universe for people to know?
I think the biggest takeaway is that your time will come when it's supposed to. The universe works in mysterious ways and it works in its own pace. And it's okay to be uncertain and to not necessarily be 100% confident in the journey that you're going down. But there's still hope and there's still a light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to get there.
Absolutely nailed it. You are so right. You're so, so right. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I enjoyed every second of this.
Yes. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
So my personal Instagram is Diana Marie Velasco. I did recently just make a trying to conceive Instagram. It is TTC Baby Velasco, and that's Instagram. You can also follow me on TikTok. I don't have very much TTC content on TikTok at the moment, but that is in my Instagram bio, and I think that's it.
Wonderful. I will link everything in the show notes for people as well.
Beautiful.
Yes. Well, thank you again. I'm sending you so much love. I'm sending you so much luck on your journey, and I will be thinking about you. We will be going through things probably on a very similar cycle, actually.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I am excited. I hope that this cycle for you is beneficial, and I hope that you end up with your bundle of joy very soon.
And next time we chat, we'll be talking about pregnancy symptoms.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm manifesting it right now.
Me too.